Hi, I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. Today I just want to quickly go through some of the colonies that were set up a few weeks ago in order to build comb during the dearth. As the honey flow is starting to come to an end, I wanted to make sure that I could show you that the process may have worked because we're going to have a honey flow, and that wouldn't really be showing that the feeding could do the job of making up that comb. Now, in a previous video, where I was making up nukes for my queens, I actually split this colony, the smaller yellow one, and in fact it was full of brood and mostly drawn comb upstairs. But we may as well have a look at the colony we set up next to it, which was all foundation upstairs. I think the yellow hive had a bit more bees in it, had a few eggs going into those combs upstairs, and so I would have expected that one to grow and build comb faster. But this one and a few others on the other yard were just foundation upstairs. So let's have a quick look and see how we have progressed. And I want to give a shout out to Eric Damboys, who helped me identify the shortcomings in my sound system of how I could fix it. I had some of the pieces but didn't know how to put everything together. And today is the second video I'm shooting using my new sound system, so hopefully it's not totally blank. But what you'll notice is my voice should be about equal volume, despite the fact that I'm now 10 feet, well, 5 feet from the camera. And in fact, if I go over here, the sound should still be pretty good. Anyway, let's see what we have upstairs. Also, people commenting on the videos also pointed out that when I'm using a bucket feeder, it is much more successful to use a bucket feeder when you fill it all the way to the top. This is absolutely correct, because when you turn it over, you're relying on this to form a vacuum seal up here. It's basically actually atmospheric pressure pushing the sugar syrup up, but most people think of it as a vacuum up here. And the bigger air space that you already have in here, in other words, if you only half fill your bucket, you've got a much bigger space that's required to make that vacuum, whereas if the bucket is full, your vacuum is formed very quickly. Now this sugar syrup is almost entirely eaten, so let's just see how the girls have done in terms of building some comb upstairs. Now, we certainly have them occupying the entire system here. They're occupying it all, which is good. How much have they built? In fact, I've gone through roughly a bucket and a half of food since this was set up. As I say, at the time this was entirely foundation. Now, I'm not expecting this to be entirely built, but I'm hoping to see some progress in, say, let's say 6 out of the 10, maybe a bit more. Now, you can already tell that they're building comb here. There's some wax on there, and they're festooning here. We have a lot of bees festooning the areas where the foundation is. Festooning is the process of building comb, and they've got a significant amount of comb built here, but considering this is the outside edge, not bad at all. Remember, this is going to become a increased volume brood chamber. Some comb built here, some comb built here. They're certainly getting on with it. It's not entirely even. Getting nearer the middle now. We actually have quite a bit of honey stored here already. Of course, in this colony it could be sugar syrup. So we've got a fair amount of sugar syrup. Doesn't look like the camera's pointing in the right direction here. So they're building a fair amount of comb, storing it with sugar syrup, and I'm pleased to say that we are starting to get a nectar flow. I was walking around the bee yard last night and I could definitely smell that sort of sweaty sock smell of goldenrod honey. And the queen has been busy up here too. We have eggs and larvae. Plenty of eggs. Young larvae at the bottom middle, and eggs all around it. The queen's pushing out the brood chamber. So that would almost count as a full comb. Here's another nearly full comb. Brood at the bottom, honey or sugar syrup at the top. Pretty much another full comb, full of brood. Another full comb. Now normally, given the honey flow that we haven't had during the dearth, this would still be foundation had I not been feeding. So that's why it's so important to feed a colony that's still building its brood chamber, because they need a lot of sugar syrup or nectar in order to build all that comb. That's about 2/3 built, maybe 3/4. About 1/4 built on this side and about half built on this side. Very nice. So we've got 2 combs, and the one over here, it doesn't look like there's much built on it yet, but they are festooning around it, lots of bees on it. So they're in the process of building. So I'm going to move this one from the outside. I'm going to move it 3 in, because there's plenty of bees to cope with this. So we're just going to get this built a little bit more completely, a little bit faster. I'm going to move this one about 3 in. So we are, I would say, 2/3 of the way to being a fully built out upper brood chamber. During a normal honey flow, that might only take 2 weeks. It's been 3 weeks now, and with feeding, that's not too bad. So let's see if we can have the same results on our other colonies. Still a little bit of sugar syrup here. That's going to dribble quite a bit. Let's go check out the other hives. Okay. So we have 3 more colonies here that were set up to draw comb, and we'll have a look inside them, see how they're getting on. We've emptied the bucket here. Again, it looks pretty nice. Plenty of bees. Festooning and building significantly right here. Tell you what, let's move the camera a bit closer. Put the bucket over here. I'll put the camera up here. Okay. That first frame looked pretty good. Lots of comb. Covers about 3/4 of the frame and built about halfway up. This one's complete, pretty much on both sides. Mostly full of food. This one's actually quite heavy already. It's actually got capped honey in it. Capped honey on this side. So some of that sugar syrup, of course. Presumably most of it is. Another completed comb. Queen's been getting up here. Very nice. That's 3 fully built combs here. And a 4th. And a 5th. And they're storing quite a bit of food here as well. And a 6th. And a 7th. And on the 8th, 2/3 built there, and about 3/4 built here. So I would call it pretty much 8 combs built, and even these outside edge frames are halfway done. So again, I'm going to move these outside edge combs in 3 spaces. And that should see them finished off with the honey flow. So I won't be feeding anymore. This from here on in, this colony is ready actually for a honey super, as is that other one. So we're ready to put honey supers on these hives. We're stopping feeding, and now these girls are ready for the honey flow. That was the real advantage of the feeding the bees through that dearth. Bulk them up, get them going, have the queen really supercharged building brood downstairs and to some extent upstairs, and now they're really ready for that honey flow with the natural nectar, and then everything from here on is going to be honey. So I don't mind sugar syrup in the brood chamber. That's actually a wonderful food for the bees to overwinter on. Sugar syrup over the winter is great because sugar syrup has very low undigestible materials in it. The ash content, in other words, is extremely low, which means that the bees can digest just about everything. And it means that they don't need to get out to fly or defecate frequently during the winter time. Again, this bucket is pretty much empty. How have we gone on here? So don't ever feel that you're short-changing your bees by feeding them sugar syrup instead of honey for the winter. A lot of honeys during the winter time can give the bees some problems because there's a lot of undigestible material, or in other words ash content, in that food. And undigestible material basically fills up their gut over the winter, and if their gut gets full, they have to defecate, so they have to go out to go to the bathroom over the winter time. And here in Maine, we may get months on end where they can't do that even when they're outdoors. Okay, so this colony is not as advanced as the other. We've got the frame not built at all here, and another comb not built at all. And this is probably just a difference in the population of the bees themselves. Okay, so they're building here, and to some extent on this side. This one's built a lot more. and storing food in there. That's 1 built, 2 built, 3 built, 4 built, 5 built. And of course what we can do is take the opportunity just to trim these little bits off here, just so they build nice and straight. That always helps you have better combs. And again, there's 2 unbuilt here. These are just foundation. So I'm only going to move 2 frames in towards the middle. That's foundation. This is a built comb. There's a built comb there. Putting foundation there. Got built one here. There's not too much brood on this yet, so I'm not breaking up any brood chambers here, which is handy. And I've got built comb on either side and put foundation in the middle. So this is only about half built. The others were 3/4 to 90% built. So process still worked very nicely. This is not quite ready for a honey super, whereas the other 2 so far are. Top of the feed, mounting the camera on the top of the feeder. Okay, let's see how these are looking. The last of the ones that I fed to build comb over the summer. That's rain on the top, not sugar syrup, by the way. When you're seeing splashes, it's because it's rained recently. I think we had a little shower last night. It has officially been the wettest July since records began in Maine. Okay, this looks similar to the one we just went through. I'd say that there's foundation here, comb here, foundation there. Foundation. 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 And starting to build comb. So we've got 3 frames of foundation there. Not bad. 1 full. 2 full. 3 full. And we've got a little bit of this bridging comb, so we'll just trim that out. I'll just make sure the queen is not there, because there are eggs in that space. So just in case, we're just going to trim that off. And they'll build straighter the next time. So don't be afraid to do that to your combs, because the bees will repair this and do a fine job with it the second time round. So whenever I come across this sort of stuff, I cut it off and the bees will repair that nicely. And you end up with nice straight combs. And they're getting on with this one. So we've got 5 combs substantially built and 5 combs virtually untouched. I would say that this is not quite big enough to move 2 frames in the middle. So we'll just move 1 of these frames of foundation into the middle. Not where I repaired it. We'll put it over here. So they're coming along very nicely, getting very prepared. When the honey flow really gets going, this comb building is going to really accelerate. But I'm not going to be necessarily having to feed them to do it, because now the honey flow is really getting going. Might just let them do it with the honey flow, but these 2 I may continue to feed for a bit longer. I'll put the feeder on here just to keep the weather out. And there we have it. So I would say been fairly successful in getting comb built in the hives, in those 5 that I did it with anyway. And so let's see, 1 that I took apart last week because it was already full of brood, 2 here which are now full of brood and honey and ready to put a honey super on, and 2 which have got a little way to go yet, maybe another week before I could put a honey super on those. Anyway, that just demonstrates the benefit of feeding during the dearth to get comb built. It really does help a lot if you do have a dearth, especially now as we're now moving into a honey flow. Those hives too, well, 1 I split, and 2 I'm really ready to put some honey supers on. In fact, come to think of it, the one that I split may very well be able to take a honey super up at the top, but I'll have to check that out. Anyway, it's shaping up to be a warm spell now. We're getting into the high 80s now, so it's time for me to go in and see if the sound system actually worked. I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. See you next time.